Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic of, well, enduring significance, especially for those of you focused on the UPSC exams. The intellectual interplay between Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi.
Indeed. You've shared some excellent material drawing from Indian Express articles that really highlights the fascinating and sometimes tense relationship between their ideas.
Exactly. Our mission today is to, really unpack their key convergences and, maybe more importantly, their crucial points of divergence.
And understanding this dynamic is absolutely vital, wouldn't you say, for grasping the ongoing dialogues around social justice, nation building in India, core stuff for mains and prelims prep.
Absolutely core. We'll be drilling down into how their distinct perspectives on big things like caste, democracy, and social reform continue to resonate and shape contemporary India. Okay, let's dive in.
What's immediately striking, I think, is you have these two monumental figures, both central to India's freedom struggle, both wanting a better India, but their paths, well, they often took very different routes.
hmm And for anyone really trying to understand the complexities of Indian society, especially for the UPSC, getting these nuances right is essential.
Couldn't agree more.
So I think it's helpful to start where they actually found some common ground. One significant area, perhaps surprisingly to some, was their shared rejection of violent revolution and communist ideology.
That's a really crucial starting point. Both leaders, despite coming from different angles, saw major problems with communism's focus on class war and violence.
Right. Gandhi was quite vocal, wasn't he? Criticizing Bolshevism, as he called it, for its violent methods. That famous quote comes to mind.
There is no road to peace. Peace is the road. Yes, that perfectly captures his commitment to nonviolence, ahimsa, and the idea that the means you use have to align with the ends you want.
And Ambedkar. He was obviously a fierce advocate for the oppressed, but he also steered clear of advocating violence.
He did. Our source material points to his work, Buddha or Karl Marx, from 1956. He explicitly contrasted the two, valuing Buddha's compassion over what he saw as Marxist coercion.
So he saw communism as maybe a shortcut, but not the right path.
Exactly. He believed in a sustained, nonviolent struggle for rights and justice, ideally within a constitutional democratic framework, not through violent upheaval.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how both Gandhi's moral idealism and Ambedkar's more rationalist, rights-based approach led them to reject violence as the primary tool.
It really is. Different paths, same conclusion on that front.
Okay, another area where they converged, though maybe with different emphasis, was this deep commitment to human dignity and social justice.
Precisely. Gandhi spoke of Sarvodaya, the upliftment of all, a very encompassing vision.
Right, everyone included.
Whereas Ambedkar, understandably focused on the groups facing the most severe oppression, championed Bahujan Hite, the welfare of the majority, the historically marginalized, especially Dalits.
So different lenses, Gandhi's broader, Ambedkar's sharper focus on the downtrodden, but the underlying goal was similar, a society grounded in dignity and justice.
A shared aspiration,
Yeah.
definitely.
And this ethical commitment seemed to extend into how they viewed public life and leadership, too.
Absolutely. The Indian Express excerpts highlight this. Both stressed that ethics were indispensable in public life. Gandhi's politics were fundamentally moral, almost spiritual.
And Ambedkar, even as a rationalist and legal scholar.
He also saw the need for integrity. He knew that laws and constitutions weren't enough if the people running the system lacked moral character. You need both.
It's interesting, though, Ambedkar wasn't always keen on Gandhi's moral politics, was he? Initially, he was quite critical.
Yes, the source material mentions his earlier, quite harsh criticism. He called it hollow and noisy, even dishonest at one point.
Why so critical?
His main concern, I think, was that Gandhi's emphasis on changing hearts, on moral persuasion, wouldn't be enough to actually dismantle the iron cage of caste. He felt it needed more forceful legal and political action.
But didn't his view on that soften a bit later on?
It seems so. Later in life, the sources suggest he did acknowledge the importance of individual morality. He apparently quoted the Buddha on self-upliftment and nonviolence, which sounds quite similar in a way to Gandhi's idea of Swaraj having that inner moral dimension.
So maybe a convergence there too, eventually, a recognition that both structural change and individual morality play a role.
Perhaps. A growing appreciation for the complementary nature of those approaches, even if his primary focus remained on legal and political rights.
Okay, so we've seen some common threads, but now we have to get into the areas where they really differed, and the massive one, central for any UPSC discussion, is caste.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the divergence is starkest. Ambedkar, having experienced the brutality of the caste system firsthand, called for nothing less than its complete annihilation.
His work, Annihilation of Caste, is incredibly powerful.
It is. He described the Hindu social order, based on caste, as and I quote from the source referencing his work, a veritable chamber of horrors. He saw it as fundamentally rotten, embedded in scriptures like the Manusmriti, which he heavily criticized.
Whereas Gandhi's position on caste was, well, more complicated and evolved over time.
Much more complicated. He strongly condemned untouchability, no question. And eventually, by 1936 in his publication Harijan, he did state clearly caste has to go.
But initially,
He differentiated between caste as it was practiced, which he saw as a distortion, and the concept of varna, a kind of functional division of labor, which he thought could be reformed and exist without hierarchy or untouchability.
a distinction Ambedkar completely rejected.
Completely. And Gandhi's relationship with texts like the Manusmriti was also different. He saw value in parts of it, alongside harmful elements that he felt were misinterpretations. For Ambedkar, the whole system, including its scriptural basis, needed to be jettisoned.
So reform versus annihilation, a fundamental split.
A fundamental ideological fault line.
And connected to this was Gandhi's use of the term Harijan for Dalits. Ambedkar's reaction to that was quite strong.
Yes, he rejected it outright. He saw Harijan, meaning children of God, as deeply patronizing.
Why patronizing?
Because he felt it glossed over the real issues, the lack of rights, the systemic discrimination, the need for political power. It felt like a renaming exercise, not a solution. He wanted Dalits to claim their own identity and fight for equality, not be given a potentially condescending label.
Understood. Okay, another major clash and a really significant historical moment was the debate over separate electorates for Dalits.
A huge point of contention. Ambedkar was convinced that separate electorates were non-negotiable.
Why specifically separate?
He believed it was the only way to guarantee genuine political representation for the depressed classes. Without it, he feared their candidates would always be dependent on the votes and goodwill of the upper castes within a joint electorate, effectively silencing their independent voice.
But Gandhi was fiercely opposed. He even undertook his famous fast unto death over this issue.
He did. His primary fear, according to the sources, was that separate electorates would permanently fracture Hindu society, weakening the united front against British rule. He believed in reform from within.
Which led to the Pune Pact in 1932?
Exactly. A compromise. Reserve seats for Dalits, but within joint electorates. Ambedkar agreed under immense pressure from Gandhi's fast, but he remained deeply critical of it.
He felt it wasn't enough.
He argued later, in works like What Congress and Gandhi Have Done to the Untouchables, that it was a setback. He maintained that Gandhi's focus on moral change failed to grasp the absolute necessity of concrete political power and legal safeguards for Dalit emancipation.
This really highlights their different approaches to how social change happens. Ambedkar's constant emphasis on legal and constitutional means is striking, a key point for UPSC aspirants thinking about the role of the state.
Absolutely. For Ambedkar, political freedom without social equality was a hollow concept. The Constitution, the law, these were the vital tools to dismantle discrimination and guarantee rights. His famous line, "Democracy is not merely a form of government, but a form of social organization," really drives this home. Democracy needed a socially equal foundation.
And Gandhi, again, his emphasis was more on the internal transformation. Personal morality, ahimsa, spiritual awakening, Swaraj in its fullest sense.
Yes, he believed fundamental change started with the individual. If individuals transformed morally and spiritually, society would inevitably follow. A bottom-up approach in a way compared to Ambedkar's focus on top-down legal structures.
Their views on religion itself also diverged dramatically, didn't they? Culminating in Ambedkar's conversion.
A pivotal divergence. Ambedkar ultimately concluded that Hinduism, as practiced, was inherently discriminatory because of caste. His conversion to Buddhism in 1956 wasn't just personal. It was a political statement, seeking an alternative ethical framework based on liberty, equality, and fraternity. He founded Navayana Buddhism, a distinct Dalit Buddhist movement.
While Gandhi remained deeply rooted in Hinduism.
Deeply rooted, yes. Right. Though he championed Sarva Dharma Sambhava, equal respect for all religions. But his defense of certain aspects, like a reformed Varna, his use of Harijan, his engagement with Manusmriti, these were points of friction with Ambedkar, who saw them as enabling the continuation of inequality.
Interesting how figures like Aurobindo and Tagore also drew inspiration from Hinduism, but perhaps interpreted it differently again.
Indeed, there wasn't a single way of relating to the tradition. even among the reformers.
Okay, finally, let's briefly touch on their differing views on the role of the state and the economy.
Ambedkar clearly favored an active interventionist state. He believed the state had a duty to rectify historical injustices through measures like affirmative action and to ensure economic justice.
State-led social engineering, in a sense.
You could say that. He saw the state as a necessary instrument for creating a more equitable social organization, not just a neutral umpire.
Whereas Gandhi's ideal was quite different. Gram Swaraj.
Yes, village self-rule, decentralized power, community self-reliance, minimal state interference. He envisioned progress radiating outwards from empowered villages.
And economically. Ambedkar leaned towards state socialism.
He did. He advocated for planned development, land reforms, equal wages, and even proposed state ownership of key industries in his States and Minorities Memorandum. He saw economic rights as fundamental.
And Gandhi.
Gandhi championed his theory of trusteeship, favored small-scale village-based industries, Swadeshi, self-reliance, and was generally skeptical of large-scale, Western-style industrialization. Very different economic blueprints.
So as we wrap up, it's clear, especially for our listeners preparing for the UPSC, that understanding both the common ground and the deep disagreements between Ambedkar and Gandhi is just essential.
Absolutely essential. Their convergences show shared hopes for a just India, but their divergences reveal fundamental debates about how to achieve that justice debates that are still very much alive today.
Right. These aren't just historical footnotes. The questions they wrestled with, caste, equality, the state's role, how society should change, they're woven into the fabric of contemporary India.
And for UPSC aspirants, analyzing their arguments provides a really powerful lens for understanding the roots of many current social and political issues. It gives you that historical depth.
Definitely. So as you continue your studies, think about how these clashing yet foundational ideologies shape our understanding of India's challenges and possibilities today.
We really encourage you to dig deeper, read their own words, understand the context. It's incredibly rewarding.
Couldn't agree more. If you found this deep dive helpful for your prep, please do hit like, subscribe for more discussions relevant to your exams, and definitely leave a comment. Let us know if you have questions or other topics you'd like us to unpack.
And remember, this discussion drew heavily on insights from excerpts referencing an article in the Indian Express.
Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive.